Hello, my name is Amy Solorzano, and today I'm going to be talking to you about optimism in psychology. To better understand optimism, I will first discuss learned optimism and then I will elaborate on what optimism actually is, and lastly, I will discuss the issues in optimism. Often, when one thinks about optimism, we associate it with looking on the bright side. But what people fail to realize is the many benefits that comes with being optimistic. To get an idea of what optimism is, we will discuss optimism as human nature and optimism as an individual difference. First, I will begin by discussing what optimism is as human nature. According to the textbook A Premier in Psychology, Freud proposed that optimism is a part of human nature but only as a derivative. It's a derivative of the conflict between instincts and socialization. Freud proposed reality testing and it became a hallmark of what a healthy individual is. Psychologists took this as their task to expose people to reality and explain to them that being optimistic isn't always the best thing and cannot always be realistic. People who only held modest expectations of their future were able to pass as being realistic, and everybody else who didn't were seen to be living in denial. According to a Premier in Psychology textbooks, matter began to change in the 1960s and 1970s. Research evidence showed that most people are not strictly realistic. The self can be regarded as an organization of knowledge, and everybody engages in an ongoing process of creating and revising their own personal history. According to a Premier in Psychology textbook, a psychologist named Tiger states that optimism is an integral part of human nature, selected for those course of evolution developing along with our cognitive abilities as indeed the human capacity for culture. Once people begin to think ahead, they could imagine dire consequences, including their own morality. Now that we discussed optimism as human nature, let's talk about optimism as an individual difference. The Premier in Psychology textbook states that psychologists who are interested in an individual difference address optimism as a characteristic. This characteristic is something people possess in various degrees. Our experiences further influence the degree to which we are optimistic or pessimistic, meaning that our experience that we had throughout our life ultimately decide if we live optimistic or pessimistic. If I was a person who had only negative experiences throughout my entire lifespan, I would most likely be pessimistic. But those who had a lot of great experiences, maybe in obtaining a job they wanted, getting accepted into the school they wanted, would have a more optimistic view out on life. Most approaches to optimism as individual difference regard optimism as a generalized expectation that influence psychological processes in which learning is involved. Optimism is usually linked to desirable characteristics like happiness, perseverance, achievement, and good health. As you can see, optimism as human nature and as individual difference is regarded differently by many psychologists. Now that I discussed what optimism is, let's discuss learned optimism. To better understand learned optimism, we will discuss Martin Seligman's theory. Martin Seligman is considered one of positive psychology's founding fathers, and learned optimism is a concept that he worked on. He believes that a more joyful outlook on life has people in a better position to enhance their well-being. Learned optimism is a concept that says that we can change our attitude and behaviors just by thinking more positively. We can change by recognizing our negative talk. And learned optimism is the opposite of learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is the phenomenon in which individuals believe that they are incapable of changing their circumstances after experiencing various stressful events. Learned optimism has many benefits. Some of these benefits include improved health, improved quality of life. People who are optimists are more aware of their health status and how to stay that way. Optimists usually take a more approach-focused method of dealing with health stressors, and optimism has also been linked to intrinsic motivation to work harder. People who are optimistic can endure more stressful circumstances, and they often show more goal-focused behavior. Now that I discussed what learned optimism is, let's discuss issues in optimism. Optimism comes with some downsides. First, let's discuss little optimism versus big optimism. Little optimism subsumes specific expectations about positive outcomes. Big optimism refers to large and less specific expectations. Optimism can be described at different levels of abstraction and at different levels and can function differently. Big optimism can be a biologically given tendency and can be filled by culture and social given tendency. Optimism to outcomes might vary according to type of optimism on focus. Overall, optimism to me is an important characteristic to have. Without optimism, I would be living my life miserably, only thinking about the negatives and never appreciating the positives. Having an optimistic attitude can help me become happier, successful, and healthier. Life is unpredictable, and you never know what is going to happen from one day to the next. Living in the unknown can be very nerve-wracking, and optimism is one way to combat these feelings. Just keeping a positive attitude towards the future helps me see new or surprising things as opportunities and helps me view challenges as new learning experiences. Optimism has its pros and cons, but overall it has more benefits than being a pessimist. Not only can it greatly improve your quality of life, but it also comes with benefits to your mental health. So, is your glass half full or half empty? Thank you.